Good.
Here we are. I think we're live for the second time today. I gotta wait till it catches up because that's the way YouTube works. You gotta wait a few seconds. Oh, you're live. So we are live. Second time today. This one planned. First one was not planned. We have Erik Mona, who might be familiar to most of you. For those of you who don't, he helps run Paizo and Pathfinder and Starfinder and anything with the word finder in it. It seems to be under his domain. And before we start, I warned you, Erik.
No.
I gotta see the pantomime. The Starfinder or Pathfinder pantomime, because you told me you can't do it. You gotta use it before
I do think there is a rush market on OGL pantomimes, but because we're live on TV right now,
yes,
or on YouTube right now, I'm not going to be able to appropriately do my Section 15 declaration, so I wouldn't want to violate the current terms of the OGL. So I think, unfortunately, the pantomime market is one we're going to need to leave to some others right now, but I will warn everyone, I think time is growing short, so highly encourage people to jump on that opportunity while it's still there.
You're getting boxed in.
Oh, well, Mark did the pantomime there. Well, we got one of us.
Yeah.
So,
hi, guys.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been an electrifying couple of weeks in the tabletop RPG business, and every day, if not every hour, seems to be bringing interesting new developments, and it's a whole new world out there almost every single day.
Yes,
a wonderful time to be alive.
How has 2023 been? Is it over yet? It feels like a whole year has gone by, and yet it's only the 19th. We still got a lot more to go.
Oh my goodness, it has been eventful. That is for sure. Looking forward to another 11 and a half months of excitement. Yeah.
You mean no sleep? Is that what you mean? No sleep?
I am not sleeping pretty much ever. And thanks to coffee and anxiety, I no longer sleep. I just funnel all that energy into work and collaboration and gathering of friends and statements of common principles and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah.
So for those who don't know who you are, because we have a lot of new people who are joining the Pathfinder 2 community, the Paizo community, the Starfinder community, Society community. Who are you? Why should we care who you are?
Who am I? Well, I'm Erik Mona. I am the publisher and chief creative officer of Paizo. I am in charge of the creative teams at Paizo that produce the Pathfinder and Starfinder role-playing games, among other things. I was a founding member of Paizo there on the very first day back in July of 2002, and have been there all along the entire time, which maps pretty close to the life cycle of the open game license, which has been sort of a common companion of mine almost from the start. Before Paizo, I was the global publications coordinator for the RPGA network, which is a fancy way of saying I edited Polyhedron magazine for the organized play team over at Wizards of the Coast with D&D. And I launched Living Greyhawk campaign there, eventually launched the Pathfinder Society organized play campaign when we did Pathfinder a while back, and still going strong. Very proud of that. My roots are in organized play community. I started plugging into that community back in 1995, going to my very first convention. That was the first year I went to Gen Con. I've never missed a single Gen Con except for the year they didn't have it ever since, and don't intend to miss any in the future. I'm honored to be in the tabletop role-playing game industry. Back when I was editing Polyhedron, I also was the guy who reviewed all of the first couple waves of D20 products that were created under the original OGL that was released alongside 3rd edition D&D. I was, as a little cub reporter child creature, hanging out like Salacious Crumb in the corner of the meeting room where Ryan Dancy first unveiled the open game license to the creative staff at Wizards of the Coast. So, and then, of course, the open game license has been an important part of both Pathfinder and Starfinder since the launch of Pathfinder in 2007 and Starfinder sometime after that. And so when a lot of this business about the open game license started becoming such an important part of everyone's lives, and we realized that stuff that we thought was very clearly stated and agreed upon for 2 decades made it seem like maybe it wasn't by all parties involved. That part of my values and that part of my experience kind of combined, and subsequently I've been heavily involved with other publishers, with the law firm of Azora Law, which is chaired by Brian Lewis, who wrote the original open game license while the in-house counsel for Wizards of the Coast back around the year 2000. We all felt very important to step up and create the kind of safe harbor license environment that has helped to fuel cooperation, collaboration, and innovation in the tabletop RPG field for 20 years. And we announced the ORC license. And today, I'm proud to say that more than 1,500 publishers from sort of household names that have been a part of this industry since the very dawn of tabletop gaming, all the way to single proprietor creators who are looking forward to releasing their first electronic product, have banded together to work together to basically pick apart in an iterative process the open RPG creative license, or as we like to call it, the ORC license. And that process has now begun. In fact, today, when we announced a list of 60 prominent publishers who are supporting the development of the license, we also launched a formal project Discord. And over the last couple of hours, I've been in there answering questions that other publishers have, and helping to sort of define some key terms and really begin gathering of forces, if you will, to prepare for review of iterative copies or drafts of the ORC license that we're hoping to start rolling out in February. So the Alliance of Orcs is formed, and it includes a lot of companies that you've probably heard of. And even now, scrolling down about 3 inches away from your faces on my desktop, I can see robust conversation is taking place, and ideally that will filter its way into very valuable feedback. We strongly believe that the most effective ORC license is going to be the one that benefits the widest array of publishers. And we're taking as sort of our spiritual guide the principles that were the foundation of the Open Game License 1.0a. In particular, that license is perpetual and irrevocable nature, and trying to incorporate those into a new license that, although in the temporary custodianship of Azora Law, will eventually be turned over to a nonprofit organization unaffiliated with any tabletop RPG company. As we all know, those companies can change leadership, they can be sold, they can have a very different objectives in one year than the other. And if we agree that the terms of the new license should be irrevocable, then I think that that license should not reside with someone with a vested interest in that license. So that is the goal, is to create a open source project and license that all publishers will be able to contribute their own clearly delineated open game content for collaborative effort, riffing on each other, innovating, supporting each other's games, just as many of us have been engaged in a way that benefits the market leader for 23 years. And we firmly believe that an open game environment benefits all of the participants in that environment. And it is our effort to forge a license that speaks to the needs of tabletop RPG publishers, which is, after all, the industry that most of us are proud to belong to. And it's actually been a very sort of shockingly easy process to gather this alliance. Now, to be clear, the folks who have pledged their support are supporting the development of the license. That license is not written. They're not swearing that they're going to use this license, but I think they all see that there's a real need for such a tool in this market. And everyone is aligned on that common purpose, even if we might not be aligned on virtually anything else. But in the 20 plus years that I have been involved in this business, at least 10 to 15 of those in a very senior level position. I certainly have other people in the industry that I would, that make products that people might buy instead of the products that Paizo buys. But the reality is, I think most professionals in this industry come from a shared set of interests at the very least, and thus I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who is a member of the tabletop game industry, particularly the senior level, who's proud to be a member of the tabletop RPG industry, who really views other publishers in the space as competitors. These are our friends. We get together at conventions, we play in each other's games, we support each other's successes. And I think what we're seeing with the coalition around the idea of the development of the ORC license is that sort of camaraderie of the tabletop game industry and those who participate in it given form. And ultimately, that form will be a truly open, independent, system neutral, open game license that works for everybody. And I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about that, or really almost anything else you or your viewers want to talk about. But that's certainly what I've been engaged in the last couple of weeks, and something that I'm looking forward to dedicating even more energy and experience and excitement toward in the months to come. And then ideally, within a few of those months, we'll have a final license that will be irrevocable, will be perpetual, and will be protected by a nonprofit that everyone will be able to use and rely upon it, and not be afraid that someone's key personnel is going to change, or someone will change their mind, or anything that would change the terms that we will all agree to when we use the license. So that's where I'm at. That's where a lot of my colleagues in the tabletop role-playing game industry are at. And I've never been more proud to be one of their colleagues, and someone who is working hard for not just Paizo's interests, but the interests of the entire industry.
So, by the way, people are making fun of you because you're talking so fast. But you should all
that's
know.
Gonna be a problem,
you should all know
say.
This is not Erik talking fast. This is Erik normally. You should see when he talks fast.
Watch any keynote address that Erik gives when they tell Erik, like, Erik, you have to say everything, and you have 20 or 30 minute slot. That's Erik.
This is not Erik talking fast.
I'll turn into kind of the Micro Machine Man from those old commercials, if you remember. Hopefully
oh my God, I love it. By the way, Jim Butler's in the chat helping you out.
Jim. Jim's been instrumental in his leadership in this issue, has really helped to pull together the troops internally at Paizo, and I think a broad part of this coalition as well. So not only am I honored to be working with the people outside of Paizo the last couple of weeks, I'm honored especially to be working with everybody at Paizo who has been putting in extra time and extra effort to defend our values. Yeah,
so I'm just noticing, by the way, since Jim's in there, if we don't get to your answers, and if you see Jim answer them, he says he's going to leave questions for you, Erik. But Jim, feel free to help out because we can't get to everything. So feel free to answer some of the questions. And who's Jim Butler? Should we know who he is, Erik?
Jim is the president of Paizo. Jim is someone who has worked in tabletop gaming for more than 20 years. He worked at TSR as an editor, and eventually was one of the main managers on the leadership team for Dungeons and Dragons when the open game license was created. Also on that team was Paizo's owner, Lisa Stevens, and we have close contact with many of the other principals at the time. And so, there's been a lot of speculation over the last few weeks of what was the intention of the original OGL, and there have been some statements, in fact, about that. And as people who were actually in the room and people who know very well what the intention of the OGL were, because we had a hand in creating it in many cases, people like Jim and Lisa and those of us with that long-term experience with this license have been enormously helpful as we chart Paizo's future and hope to create a beacon that other companies in the industry can follow to a collaborative future in the days ahead.
So people are very excited. I'm going to let the people really talk here because they're pretty much asking the same questions we're going to ask anyhow.
Cool.
Let's start out with Tiger Eyes with his $30 super chat. Mark, you know what Tiger Eyes has asked. Why don't you ask the question?
Yes, Tiger Eyes is asking a question that I saw really several times in some of our previous videos. where some people are worried because they saw in OGL 1.2 that it would have a morality clause that sort of Wizards said that they have the sole right to determine whether something was, say, obscene, a word that has sometimes been used to censor the LGBTQIA community, or harmful, or various other statements. And Tiger Eyes was wondering, like, if anything like that was in the ORC, and if so, or was related to ORC, how would it be done? Would it be centralized with ORC? Would it be that each publisher might have a compatibility license that had their own version of that?
Well, it's a good question, and it's something that we know is on a lot of people's minds because we're seeing those same comments online and things like that. I think there's a couple of caveats that are really important before I kind of try my best to answer that question. And one of those caveats is that the ORC license is not written yet. You know, we are expecting the first draft for review purposes for project participants in February. But until that time happens, there is no ORC license. You know, it's more we are dedicated to the ideals and the values of the ORC license, and we're now working together to communicate with one another and make sure that as much as possible those communications go into the early drafts. But really, I think the ORC license project is going to take off in earnest once we have actual documentation to look at. You know, virtually everyone in the professional tabletop industry is in some way kind of a rules lawyer, if you will. And so I'm really looking forward to unleashing that power to really be talking about something specific and objective rather than just sort of vague and undefined. So first caveat that's very, very important: ORC license is not yet written. So can I answer what is and isn't in the license yet? No, of course I can't. That's going to be an iterative process that a lot of publishers are going to be involved with. And I've said at the beginning, and I will say until we're done, the best ORC license is the one that works for the largest number of publishers. The idea is that everybody contributes and kind of everybody wins. And so with that in mind, I think I also am going to have to answer some of these questions that are more on my personal feelings as one of the many publishers involved with the effort, and not someone who's kind of got a ringside seat and talks to Brian Lewis and knows exactly what's going to happen, you know, with the drafting process. But I unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the challenges and difficulties that many of us in the community have been under over the last couple of weeks really come from some pretty fundamental ignorance of what the open game license is and isn't, and how it is used specifically. So the reason I bring that up right now is that under the terms of the OGL 1.0a, there's not a lot, if any, moral clauses or anything like that, because the point of the open game license is to cover that very specific issue of mechanical rules, which I think anyone who's been paying very close attention to this topic over the last couple of years days, weeks, hours, know that there's a lot of question, not a lot of question, there's a pretty clearly stated from the Supreme Court, no less, that game rules are not copyrightable. And so theoretically, you don't need any license at all to publish something that has a game rule that's similar to another company's game rule. Now, those cases are usually about very simple things like board games and things like that. And if you get into the realm of the copyrighted expression of those rules, things get particularly more murky. And is that acceptable? Is it not? Well, you could pay a lawyer thousands of dollars for them to give you their judgment, which is ultimately could come down to, well, yeah, probably it's defendable, but you could still go to court over it, and you could still have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend yourself. And even then, you might be right, but you might not win. And I don't know a lot of tabletop RPG companies that have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting around. I know of one company in this space who has hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting around, and they have been pretty clear that they don't agree with the interpretation of the terms that were clearly shared with everybody in corporate communications from that company for 20 years. So in that environment, what do you do? The problem is that a lot of this is conflating, in my opinion, the purpose of the open game license, which is to cover those rules which are admittedly a little bit of a gray area, and say, look, we all know it's a little bit of a gray area. By agreeing to these terms, we are all cool. We're not going to go after you. We all benefit together. And that has worked for a long time. Now, at the same time as Wizards lay out the open game license back in 2000 or whatever it was, they released the D20 system license, sometimes called the D20 STL. And that was the thing that had that little red bug that was on everybody's products for the first couple of years. It said compatible, with Dungeons and Dragons and had that common branding. So it was easier to find in stores and easier to know, oh, this plugs into this game. And it was a mechanism of the license of that logo in those trademarks, which are not covered by the open game license, that allowed people to officially say, look, this is a D&D product. And because Wizards of the Coast was the company that created both of those licenses, the open game license is copyright Wizards of the Coast. It's their license. And so when you've got significant turnover in company leadership and people who are now in positions of power that were not present at some of those original conversations, probably did not pay attention to long-standing FAQs until they were removed 3 weeks ago or whatever it was from the website. Those people kind of understandably think of open game license and a D&D license as essentially the same thing, but they're emphatically not the same thing. And the ORC license is not an attempt to replicate the D20 system license, or indeed is completely agnostic on issues of compatibility and things like that. I think this project may get into those things, when we complete the framework of the license that allows for sharing under a safe harbor rules language. Maybe we'll move on and say, okay, and here's some tips on how to do compatibility licenses for your brand, because a lot of people are going to want to do that. But the problem with any kind of license that tries to push the rules stuff and the IP brand stuff into the same agreement is then all of a sudden you do have considerations like, well, I don't want there to be someone publishing a Pathfinder book that's got like racist content in it. I think that's a totally understandable and respectable position for a publisher to take. But there are other mechanisms to prevent that risk from happening that really don't have anything to do with whether a game mechanic is part of an open corpus of material that people can access through a license. So this whole concept of, is there a morality clause and whatever, I think where we're going to probably end up, at least in the what I'm hoping and as we work through this as a group, is, are there mechanisms perhaps within each individual company's contributed SRD, or are there mechanisms within a license that allows you to claim compatibility with a trademark, or maybe gives access to, let's say there's a publisher who's eager to have other publishers explore a corner of their world or something, and there's some limited or maybe very open access to things that are more traditionally copyrightable intellectual property. That's probably, in my opinion, as a publisher who's worked with the open game license for 20 years, and as someone who's very sympathetic to not wanting to have my brand associated with offensive content, I totally get that. But it's not really what the open game license is about, and it's not really, at least presently, what the ORC license is about. And the ORC license is about is creating a safe harbor for those rules mechanics issues. And so we'll see. We now have thousands of people participating in the conversation that were not participating in the conversation a few weeks ago. And I do know that this issue of how do I kind of protect my brand is something that is of a lot of interest to a lot of participating publishers. But I think for me, again, me speaking as Erik, I think it's really valuable to understand that there are elements of the contribution to a corpus of rules that everyone can lose. You do lose some control over that stuff under the current terms of the OGL. We have people in the space who are producing very high quality products and things that use our rules that Paizo doesn't see a dime off of. And you just kind of got to live with that, because that's part of the deal. Those things help to enhance the community. They empower the network of players. A lot of people say, well, why does Paizo give all of their rules away for free on like archivesofnethys.com? And the answer is, We have to. It's part of the deal of the open game license that the material that you release under it is usable under very open terms for a wide variety of people, which in some ways is going to include some uses that you might not have chosen for yourself. You might not have wanted out there. Sometimes that means someone's going to come up with a really cool idea that you're like, I wish I'd come up with that idea. Cool that they're making all that money on that, but darn, I kind of wish I'd done that. And that's, you got to lump it. You got to live with it. That's part of the deal. And sometimes that means someone will put something out where you're like, I don't know about that. I certainly wouldn't have published that. But, there's A, the market is going to decide whether people are interested in that or not. And B, if there's some element of the rules that you're contributing to that corpus of open material that you feel is so identifiable with your brand that if it was published, it would just automatically make people think that it was that brand. Don't put that in the open game. You don't have to contribute absolutely everything you create to it. So that would be my recommendation right now. I'm eager to get the opinions of a lot of the other publishers involved, and I'm sure not everyone will totally agree with that, and that's fine. We're at the beginning of this process. We'll go through many drafts, but I currently really feel very strongly that the open RPG creative license needs to take as its guidepost the OGL 1.0A, which has worked really, really well for a long, long time. And that license is about rules mechanics and not about morality. Another thing that's worth pointing out, I've been in this business for 20 plus years, and there were things 20 plus years ago that you could easily have said in a product. But nowadays, because we've ideally become more compassionate and more knowledgeable about the perspectives and positions of other people, that you wouldn't have done. Even I as the same person, there's things I have published in the past that today, knowing what I know, I wouldn't have published, right? Or I won't publish now. That is an evolution. Some of that is cultural. Some of that is just maybe ignorance and me or it's somebody else finally catching up to where we need to be. Fair enough. But the reality is the moral standards that would have been put in place in 1999 when this license was originally being built are nowhere near what the moral standards of 2023 are today. And when you're talking about your clearly owned intellectual property, your brands, your trademarks, I think you as the publisher have every right in the world to evolve your feelings about what is and isn't appropriate uses of that material. But luckily for the development of the ORC license, that's not what we're talking about primarily. We're talking about mechanical rules, content, and creating a safe harbor and a series of tools and instructions and guidelines so that everyone participating in that is able to use the license without having to bankrupt their company by paying for a lawyer that they can't afford.
That's kind of exactly what I expected you would say, Eric.
This is great. We're gonna get at this rate like 3 more questions done, but
yeah. Well,
let's keep going.
It was a big question.
No, that was I know.
It's important.
I completely agree. I'm just joshing. These next ones are more statements than questions, so they'll go pretty quick. John Rice sent a $10 super chat and said, "Hey Eric, no time, no hang. Can't wait to see the orc." That's it.
Cool.
There was.
Well, there's Rob Tremarco.
That has a question in it. It says, "Mr. Mona, are you moonlighting as a shampoo model? That's a glorious mane of hair you're sporting."
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
all
you.
hail the orc.
Mm-hmm.
Just like everybody else at the beginning of the pandemic, I did not cut my hair, and I guess I'm like a heavy metal kid at heart, and I could cut it, but like for right now anyway, having this long hair is kind of reminding me of like when I was in high school and falling in love with all this stuff in the first place. And I need all the personal inspiration and will to fight that I've got available to me. And if I can do that while cranking Megadeth's Rust in Peace or something, I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay, Eddie. I'll leave
June
it at
Solar for $10 had another one that was a comment.
Yeah.
Which is, "Eric, like the pulp library behind you, we need the team to get the orc out of their cave. Keep hope alive, June."
I gotta say, thank you, June. June's a guy I met it through Pathfinder Society, which is a huge, the community, again, this is about, in large part, community of publishers, community of players, and Pathfinder Society, which, Mark, I know you have background in as well. That's a touch point for a lot of a lot of how all of us interact with the community. And so hello to June. I appreciate the comment. I mean, the fact of the matter is I have not been more energized about the work in front of us than I am now for a long time. You know, it's very important. I don't think, I mean, everybody involved with this process, I think, knows from just looking on Twitter, looking online, that there's a lot of anguish and frustration and fear. But I think people who are outside of the tabletop RPG business, maybe that's a little bit more theoretical or something. I mean, the last few weeks have really created a lot of anguish in the community, and a lot of people. I mean, this isn't just about publishers. It's not about Paizo. It's about employees, and it's about, you know, support staff, and it's about freelancers, and it's about the whole community that for 23 years was really kind of all working together for common good. And then all of a sudden there's a disruption to that, and that in and of itself is extremely unsettling. I am personally channeling that unsettling feeling into action and into excitement and into collaboration. But it would be wrong to say that everyone who's been affected by this has been empowered. You know, there's a lot of people who are scared and hurting. And, you know, I'm eager to get to a place where if the ORC license can play a role in giving people a sense of stability and a sense of a way forward, then I think that alone is reason enough to dedicate the time and energy and effort that we are all now involved with.
I think it's fair to say Stephen and I have been also channeling that same anxiety into action. But certainly I noticed people making comments on our videos that seemed like that they felt a little more like there was if not complete stability, then at least like some kind of safe harbor in a storm when they saw the ORC license announcement.
Well, I'm really gratified to hear that, because, you know, I wouldn't say that's one of the project's principal goals, but that's definitely been something that's been in the back of a lot of our heads this whole time.
Yeah, no, I know for a fact, just with our announcements and talking to people, and obviously the all hell ORC that is taking over social media, that people are looking towards a safe harbor. And it looks like you are saying all the right things and doing all the right things, and obviously your background and history and I mean, that's the difference. It's like you have lived and breathed role-playing games for so long that you are part of the hobby, whether you want to be or not, and this is your part of your existence. So to hurt it would be like hurting yourself in a way, and I feel like other people are not. They are acting in just interests of money and marketplace and market share, and they are sacrificing the hobby for that. And they're finding out that for a lot of people, this hobby is not just playing games. You know, this isn't like going out to eat at your favorite restaurant. Like, this is a lifestyle brand, and this is something that people identify with. And when you start messing with that, they get pretty damn angry pretty damn quick, because now you're messing with their life.
Yeah. And I mean, it on the one level, you know, you say it's a lifestyle brand, and it's like, okay, Dungeons and Dragons is a lifestyle brand, but tabletop gaming is a lifestyle, period.
Right.
And the open game license touches a lot more than just D&D. There are other game systems that used it as that safe harbor sharing framework that don't have anything to do with the SRDs released by Wizards of the Coast. So, you know, I think a real danger here, perhaps, is the idea, you know, one thing I've certainly noticed on the Pathfinder side, and a lot of other publishers, I'm sure, noticed that D&D as a brand is so ubiquitous that sometimes people will say, oh, I'm getting together with my friends to play D&D, when they're actually playing a totally different game system. I think there's a real danger of equating the tabletop games industry and the tabletop games hobby, which is one of the most diverse and unique gathering of cool and different ideas, and just sort of saying, well, that's D&D. I think that the idea of like, and I'm not ascribing this to anybody, but the idea of like, oh, well, these very basic concepts a fighter or a wizard. Those are the unique property of any one company. It just doesn't wash. And there's a real danger in sort of the idea of D&D on one hand being sort of a code word for all of these games that we all know very well are not Dungeons and Dragons. And so one of the things that I think is good for the tabletop industry over the course of the last couple of weeks is there are a lot of gamers who are looking to expand. Maybe they've come to the hobby through D&D in the last, couple of years. They've had phenomenal success to the point in which it's kind of honestly choking out a lot of other smaller companies. Like take a stream, right? Why would you stream, if you're a streamer, why would you stream content for a game you love when it gets a tenth of the exposure as just going with the industry leaders? So that's the strength, honestly buoyed by the open game license and all of the other third-party creators and things. That's the point. That benefits the industry leader. And now what we're seeing is instead of that default, well, it's everyone plays D&D, so we might as well not play anything else. A lot of those folks who've come to the hobby, I think in particular in the last half decade, are now maybe for the first time looking around and starting to realize, holy crap, there's really a lot of other incredibly interesting, incredibly different games that maybe even speak to me more than D&D, or maybe speak to me more than Pathfinder, maybe speak to me more than sword and sorcery as a genre at all. And I know, because all of us are talking now in a way that we were not, before, just in terms of like, how is it going? And almost every company in this industry has seen an influx of interest of new customers in the last week. That is not how most of us were feeling it was going to go 2 weeks ago. And I think there's a lot of concern that maybe that's only short term and maybe everything's going to swing back. But I don't know. There seems to be a little bit. I think this one's a little bit different, and we'll see what happens, but regardless, the additional attention to other publishers, other games, the huge variety of offerings that this industry has to offer. It's not very well stated offerings that the industry has to offer, but hopefully you understand what I'm getting at. I mean, that is a huge win for everybody.
Yeah, I mean,
almost everybody.
You and I have discussed this in the past. I mean, this was in many ways a disruption event that has woken people's eyes up, which doesn't make sense, but you know what I'm saying. And that they are actually, breaking out of, they play D&D because everyone plays D&D, or they play, one game, and they just because that's the game everyone plays and that's what we play. And now it's almost an excuse for them to say, hey, well, let's see what else is out there, whether it's Pathfinder or Root or Aliens or One Ring, doesn't matter. It's like we're finally seeing, wow, there's other games out here, and it's like a whole new world. That's like, wow, there's all these great games. Let's try something else. We don't always have to be playing the same thing every freaking time. And
that's exactly right. And our goal with the ORC license is that all of those games will be able to share with one another. Not just like, hey, we want you to make supplements for our game specifically, but maybe there's some really cool novel rule mechanic in like an indie game that someone goes, oh, if I took that and applied it to my World War II tactical game or something, it would really kind of push things forward. That's the innovation side of this that I think is really interesting and important, and I think is going to hopefully empower a bit of a renaissance kind of across the industry. If we do it right, I think it will.
And that could be super cool, right? Because a lot of indie games are very genre specific, but that could mean that mechanics could be used. Like imagine if you had an overall, like you said, a World War II or a fantasy RPG, and then they grab like Blades in the Dark as the heist system for that RPG. It's like, oh, are you going to do a heist? Well, we're going to use some stuff from Forged in the Dark for that. And just other combinations of RPGs could be really cool.
Yeah, I think that, if this works the way that we hope, and that I think most, if not all of the participants hope, I think it will allow for things like that. And that will, I think there's, if you think about every single publisher is just kind of their own tree in the forest, not all those trees are going to be as successful as others. Some of them are not going to make it. And just there are a lot of great ideas in some of those, those trees that would benefit the whole forest, that if that tree doesn't make it, then those ideas don't make it either, and they're kind of locked away forever. That's the right of every publisher, is to say, I'm not sharing my stuff. I'm just making my own stuff. Now, whether the game rule mechanics are fully protectable under that, talk to your lawyer. I don't know, right? But I don't know. I think that you don't have to contribute to the open game stuff if you don't want to, but the option is there if you want to hook into a network and hook into the opportunities for innovation. And the fact that people won't just be using the ORC for non sort of D20 games as a happenstance or as a convenience, but as a key feature of the license, I think is one of the real powerful elements of what we're shooting for.
So let's get.
All right.
Let's
Should we get back to user
let's
questions?
crank
Maybe
through some of these super chats.
So T.A. Hawkins for $2 asked the morality clause question also. Pilgrim Media for $2 said, I salute you, gentlemen. I'm learning a lot. Crazy Fuzzy for $5 said, will ORC be modular, meaning can you opt to restrict your content to just publishing or allow it for video games, media, etc., and can it be different?
It's a good question. And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. Realistically, we're not there yet. And I'm eager to see what the folks from Azora think and put in the first draft. And if that works for everybody, then great. If it doesn't, we'll keep tweaking it and we'll get it to something that works for everybody. I think one of the interesting things that's interesting for most of us is because the OGL as present does not preclude a whole bunch of stuff. It doesn't say, okay, you can't do this, no pantomime, whatever. People are able to apply it to things that weren't necessarily conceived of when it itself was originally conceived. In a sense, that kind of, in some ways, it sort of future-proofs it, or at least future-proofs the concept of it. I don't know if everyone's going to want that. We're going to have to talk about it, but it's worked pretty well so far.
All right. Domingo Silva for $5 said, I saw Ryan Dancy commented again on his petition, as did Clark Peterson. Is a comment.
They were both there at the very beginning. The very first version of I think it was probably the D20 system license, maybe the OGL. The very first one up at the top said, to Clark Peterson. I mean, Clark, who was the publisher of Necromancer Games at the time, his name is literally written into the history of open gaming, and it's been interesting to have him kind of come out of the woodwork a little bit. He's retired from
He's a judge now, right? So he had to retire from that.
I guess so. But yeah, it's been great to make contact with him again.
So Walter Starr for $10 said, will you be able to move Pathfinder 2e from OGL 1.0a directly to ORC with little effort?
Boy, there's a handful of adjectives in that. Let me try and break that down. Yes, the goal is, look, when we created Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I think the smartest decision we made, and one of the guiding principles of the design, as you know, Mark, because you were there, is start this from a blank sheet of paper. We're not going to copy a single phrase from the existing SRD. There are certainly rules concepts that have a common lineage back to the original material, but in terms of the copyrightable expressions of those, let's start from scratch. And furthermore, as you also know, part of the process of Pathfinder 2nd Edition was to make Pathfinder better at being Pathfinder, not better at emulating some other game system. When we created Pathfinder 1, it was a very basic update of the at that point going out of print 3.5 rules. But that was a very different mission. The mission there was, holy crap, we have 8 months of 3.5 adventures planned out. What are we going to do? We have no access to the 4th edition rules. And even I think at the time we made that decision, the GSL had not even, by the time the GSL came out, it was too late for us. We had to move forward. So that was a very different kind of approach when we had more time to think about it, more time to, we'd had a decade essentially of Pathfinder 1 itself evolving and the audience evolving and getting a better sense of how the game would work more smoothly. We really divorced ourselves from a lot of that material. And so in doing so, we're very confident that the rules of Pathfinder are their own thing, and thus we will be contributing an SRD to the ORC license when the ORC license is complete, assuming that we're comfortable with the terms of the ORC license, right? We gotta like it just like everybody else. I'm confident that we will, and I'm confident that they will. And yes, we will be releasing Pathfinder 2. Under the SRD. What exactly that looks like, what monsters are in it, what is in it, that's all TBD. We're in the process of trying to figure that out, and we'll have much more to say about it when we're ready. But for right now, I'm focused more on what is the licensing mechanism that allows our community to come along with us in that process, and that's where the ORC license comes in.
Makes sense to me. Stephen, is there anything before Thirsty's comment?
Two
because
before
I
that
got one of the scrolling issues.
Yep. Hilarious Mallory sent $10 and said, Eric, with everything that has come about, is there any errata left for Pathfinder First Edition before that edition is completely closed off?
I
still need corrections for the ooze morph archetype specifically.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, based on a couple of names that you've mentioned, I know there's Paizo people watching this, and maybe one of them can act on an ooze morph errata as soon as possible, as long as we can fit it in with our plans to do some rush pantomimes.
There you go.
Or play the archetype from the Slithering in second edition, or Slime from Year of Monsters.
That's right. We got it.
But it's an interesting point, because although I think Pathfinder 2 did itself a lot of favors by being its own game, Pathfinder 1, a lot of that lineage is a lot closer to material that we really only were able to access through the OGL, including some verbatim text and stuff. So I don't think anything I've seen from Wizards has been particularly clear at this point forward about 1.0A material in the future. Like, I know that you couldn't, at least my understanding of what I read in between meetings today of the latest is that you couldn't publish new material under OGL 1.0A, which, by the way, I think is wrong. And the OGL 1.0A is irrevocable.
That's what they're trying to do.
So that's all that. But let's just go with it. And as my understanding is that you wouldn't be able to publish new material for Pathfinder 1E under those terms. Furthermore, I think one of the things that's interesting is my understanding is that the SRD that will connect to the new OGL is a 5.1 SRD. I didn't see anything about a 3.0 or 3.5 SRD in that. And I think, the idea of the ability to support sort of legacy systems, which is very much, I'm sure, a concern of sort of the old school movement that's been such a critical part of the open game environment from the very first Gen Con. They've got an important role to play in this conversation, and I strongly feel that they're a constituency that needs to be served by the ORC license. If you're looking for kind of hobbyists doing it for the love of the game kind of folks, I think you're going to find a lot of them there. I think you're going to find a lot of them in every single market segment. But there's a part of me, in part because just I was there at that first Gen Con, running from Atlas Games booth to Green Ronin's booth to Necromancer's booth to Trollord's booth to pick up that kind of first wave D20 OGL stuff. If this deal doesn't work for those folks who were there at the beginning, I think we got a real problem. And so it's very important that the constituencies that help to form our coalition all see value in the license that we ultimately produce.
So we also have John Harrison sent a $3.44 super chat. It's been stated that Pathfinder 2E is safe without any OGL, but what about Starfinder?
I think Starfinder. Ask me that question again in a couple of weeks. I'm not. The reality is, it's like there's a lot that we have to go through and a lot we have to figure out. I have some very, very exciting things to think about and share when it comes to Starfinder. I feel like the team that we have working on Starfinder right now is just like locked in and really knows what they want and knows what they want to do with their game and with the brand. And some of the meetings that I've been in about Starfinder over the course of the last year are some of the most exciting creative meetings that I've had in my career. And so Starfinder is not going away. Starfinder is an important part of Paizo's portfolio of games and brands, and we're looking at the details very, very closely. Starfinder, as many people know, came out a year and a half before Pathfinder 2. It definitely benefited from some of the in-progress rules innovations that the Pathfinder 2 team had started and kind of took the ball from the 50-yard line, so to speak. And then meanwhile, though, that the Pathfinder team continued to play test and innovate for another full year at that point. And so certainly one of the things we keep hearing at Paizo and have been hearing for some time is, there are some killer apps in Pathfinder 2, the 3-action economy, the degrees of success. There's a lot of them. Many of them thanks to your co-host, Mark Seifter. And people are very eager to be able to play with some of that modern design technology in the Starfinder ecosystem. And so we'll see how this all shakes out. But I like, as a publisher, to provide the things that people tell me they want. And the last couple of weeks have shaken up literally all of our publishing plans for the next couple of years. And so in that environment, you start looking around and say, well, yeah, what would be fun to do? What could we do? And Starfinder is very definitely a big part of those conversations. And we'll have more to say about that later. But for right now, rest assured, Starfinder brand is not going anywhere. And we have some really exciting stories to tell that we're very eager to share with everybody.
Okay, now
that is a very deft and specific answer.
Now we're up to Thirsty.
Thank you.
Okay. Thirsty says contributing to the fund to make Erik, Mark, and Steven get some sleep.
Guys, when I'm off here, I'm going to do the same thing I've done every night, spend another couple of hours drafting public statements, and then lull myself to sleep watching all the YouTube coverage of this whole mess until I finally run out of caffeine and anxiety and my eyes close after what I call the 4:30 a.m. sleep thermocline. There's a phrase that I didn't know 2 weeks ago. There's no coming back after 4:30 a.m. So that's my rest these days. Hopefully things will return to normal soon.
So do we have to make a video called Erik's Lullaby that just plays some kind of peaceful
it's maybe
music?
Maybe. I won't say I haven't fallen asleep to your two beautiful voices at some point.
I was going to say the Erik Mona Lullaby is
so that you're tricked into looking at it.
Is Roll for Combat. He just listens to us and he falls asleep. There you go.
I mean, works like a charm.
There you go. We're very lulling.
There you have it. So Awkward Couple Gaming says, I feel VTTs like Foundry are in danger now with the policy and the draft they released today. Will VTTs be part of the conversation at ORC, especially the animations that WotC are so scared of? I mean, I saw VTTs right there in the blog that you just
We've got VTT publishers in our coalition. And so I'm very confident that when it comes to some of that technology stuff, there's elements to it that tabletop role-playing publisher is probably not the world's biggest expert on. And so we're honored to have them as a part of the coalition. And we're looking forward to incorporating their perspectives and their feedback as we work toward an ORC license that works for the largest array of publishers possible. And that includes VTT partners. One of the things that I think the pandemic has taught us is that the online gaming is not going away. Online gaming is a major part of how a lot of people game. There are people to this day who are still not comfortable gathering in person for games in the face of the COVID pandemic. They're going to be playing online for a long time to come. There are people who came to tabletop RPGs during the pandemic and maybe haven't even had the opportunity to play in person. There are a ton of us, of course, who do both. VTTs are an important part of the future of this hobby, and the ability of all publishers to partner up with them and work together with them in a healthy environment that benefits everybody, I think is an important value that virtually every publisher in this industry shares.
I saw Fantasy Grounds, Foundry, and Roll20 in alphabetical order. All were part in the blog of that coalition. So that sounds like you've got some heavy hitters.
All three companies are companies that we at Paizo are honored to be partnered with, and they're all three bring value to their customers in different ways that appeal to different customers. And I want them to, if the ORC license can in any way make their lives easier and make it easier for fans of content to be able to work with virtual tabletops, dynamic character generators, all that kind of stuff, I think that's critical. And I think that all companies should be able to participate in that market and in that part of the evolving hobby. And I think if that ever becomes a domain of one publisher or only a couple of big publishers, I think we're running into some real trouble. And I think it's not good for the industry. And so hopefully that doesn't happen. And if a tool like the ORC license helps to prevent something from that happening, then I'm honored to be a part of it for that reason as well.
That makes sense. So Vicious with 2 1s and a dash for $1.99 asked, will Pathfinder 2e need to be re-released to be under the ORC?
Ask me again later. I think the important thing. I think I can answer that. In order to release content under the ORC, we need to provide a system reference document that people can use as the baseline of like what it is that we're opening. And since we need to restart the process of opening our content because the current version of the license, even though it can't be, is being threatened with being revoked, that's no longer a safe place for any of us to do business with that. And so, well, I don't want to speak for anybody. Maybe people will find terms that they like, but it doesn't work for me. And I don't think it's going to work for a lot of other people. So I don't know. I kind of lost my train of thought here, but there you go.
That's okay. We know you haven't got much sleep. So.
That's true.
Yeah, right.
That's true.
So I saw something from Princess Gamer.
That's next. Yep.
That says, let me see where it is now.
I could do it. $2 super chat. Question: will ORC protect streamers and VTubers? I think you pretty much mentioned that.
I mean, I don't exactly know how to answer that. I think that we'll have to be very clear and like talk about that as a group, but the ORC is designed to create a safe harbor around copyright issues related to expressions of rules mechanics. So I think, again, we're dealing with conflation of what these open licenses really are and need to be. And I strongly suspect things like streamers and that type of application is something that's probably better covered by some sort of fan policy of the individual companies. I personally feel, and again, this is just me speaking as Erik, not me speaking as a representative of the ORC license or even as a representative of Paizo, but I sort of feel like the idea of saying, well, how does this game mechanics license apply to something that has nothing to do with game mechanics is a blind alley and a waste of time to talk about, because it on its face has nothing to do with those things. It's kind of like reassurances, like, oh, you'll be able to do miniatures and novels. It's like, yeah, of course we will. There's no game mechanics in those things. And as long as you stay away from protectable copyrighted material, of course you can do those. I don't need anyone's permission to make a miniature of a goblin.
By the way, people are commenting how badass your goblin is behind you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's Craig. His name is Craig, and he is my goblin. Pathfinder goblin. And I didn't need a license to make him because he's a goblin.
So Adrian Carlson for $5 asked, will ORC have a process for adding new game systems to the license?
Yeah. I mean, again, the idea is to make it perpetual and irrevocable. So if that's the case, then people could make new game systems 40 years from now and plug them into the ORC license. So absolutely, it is designed to have new material contributed to it. Yes.
All right. Uno Kitsune has a question and then a statement. The question of, does Paizo have a way to contact the writers of the Dark Eye? I think I know the answer because they translate stuff for Pathfinder to German.
The Dark Eye is produced by Ulysses Spiele, who is on the list that we posted today of 60 prominent supporters of the ORC license. So in order to get their permission to be on that list, I certainly have contacts with the people at Ulysses Spiel.
And then their statement is, I want to ask them permission to publish my work in the future, but I'm not sure how that's connected.
They want to ask Ulysses Spiel to publish Dark Eye compatible material. Is that the question?
It might be. It doesn't.
If
quite
that's
say
the
that, but that might
case,
be.
I would recommend contacting Ulysses Spiel, and they'll be able to give you an answer. And so, and I think this is, I don't want to speak for them at all, but just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page here. Even the ORC license will not allow you to produce stuff that is explicitly advertised as, you know, this is a supplement for somebody else's game. You might have a novel legal theory that says you can do that without a license, in which case go for it, and best of luck to you. But I think that's a different thing. So right now, if the question is, how do I produce a supplement that uses another company's brands and intellectual property and all that, the answer is to set up a license with that company and contact them directly. Maybe through this process, there'll be other ways that you can kind of do that. A lot of people in the last couple of weeks have announced their own programs, affiliate publisher programs. So there's lots of opportunity there. I don't know about the Dark Eye. I don't speak German, unfortunately. So I'm not sure what their policy for those things are, but my first recommendation would be go to their website, see if they've got something posted. And if not, send them an email and see what might happen. You never know what happens when you email a role-playing game company. That's a lesson I can definitely tell you from just my own experience in the last couple of weeks. I think you'll find most of them are very friendly.
One question I want to just cut because it's actually fairly interesting.
Okay.
Is Darrington Press on your list for ORC?
But just cards on the table. I don't have really any strong contacts over there. So I consequently didn't ask. There are a handful of people in the space that I could have reached out to, but I know that it's probably uncomfortable for some of those folks to kind of step up and offer full-throated support, even if they are sort of emotionally aligned. And so I've got to be, and I think we all need to be very cognizant of people's existing business relationships and people's friendships, and trying to kind of force, this is just, again, just me speaking, but trying to kind of force a statement out of people. Not everybody needs to step up at the same time, you know, and I don't know what Critical Role is planning on doing. I imagine it will be what they consider to be in their best interest. They've certainly been a huge brand and beacon for new customers in this business, and so I think they have a lot of power in this situation. And you know, I certainly wish them the best.
Sorry,
so it looks like
just wanted to ask that one. You can keep going, Mark.
Yeah, it looks like the next one is Fern Lovebond for $2. Is wondering how near D&D is to being a non-trademark term a la Band-Aid, and I think that's something no one
I can't speculate on that.
Is even remotely qualified to.
All I can say is it kind of annoys me when people play my game and call it D&D, because it's not.
Well, if it makes you feel better, if I play D&D, I call it Pathfinder. So there you go.
It does make me feel better, okay. Steve. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess the balance, we've achieved balance after all, and it doesn't bother me at all.
There you go.
Balance
Thank you,
in
sir.
the fools.
Thank you.
Tegan R for $5 said, "This hobby is my lifelong passion. 5e was my home system, but no longer. I will stand by the people championing the values of our community."
Cheers.
All right, let me see what comes after that.
Joe Jergen sent $9.99 super chat. Will the ORC drafts be available to the community, and will they be able to give feedback?
The ORC drafts will be distributed to participating publishers for commentary, and I expect them to hit the internet roughly 35 seconds after they are provided to participating publishers.
Seconds,
and we would welcome all the public comment that people want to give, and we're definitely going to be looking in a variety of spaces for that comment. I think that it's important that the participating publishers have an opportunity to kind of talk face to face or you know, screen to screen or whatever, without having to kind of have the entire internet also involved in that conversation. But the entire internet, who all have strong feelings about this stuff, are the customers that these products are going to be catered to, and many of them have aspirations to join as publishers at some point as well. So their opinions are important. Again, if the ORC license is truly going to be perpetual and irrevocable, it needs to work for publishers who don't even know they're publishers yet. And so we welcome input from everyone. And we've been getting input from people on Twitter, particularly, but I'm sure a lot of other places as well. And we process that and set it up the chain. You know, we know, for example, from the internet that there are a lot of questions about electronic integration, about how SRDs work exactly, about this morality clause issue we discussed earlier. You know, these are things that the public commentary helps us and makes us understand kind of like, all right, these are issues that this is where the audience is at. Let's try and talk about where publishers are at, and let's try to find a medium, again, that kind of works for everyone.
All right, lightning round.
Okay.
T3 Dragoon was just joining. Do you have a guesstimate ETA of when the ORC might go to that state that you just
first
said,
draft we expect to be passed along to participants in February. Right now, that's about as specific as I'm willing to get, and maybe it's aspirational, right? But that's what we hope. There is a powerful interest of most of the people involved in the project to move rapidly, but also carefully, right? So we want to balance. There's a lot of people who had products in the chamber ready to go that they now are not sure where they're going to have a home. There are a lot of publishers who previously supported maybe one publisher's game who are now looking at other opportunities and things, and it's imperative that all of those folks have that safe harbor that the OGL has provided for 23 years. We want to get that to people as soon as possible, and we want to have people deploying their own SRDs as soon as possible, but we also have a responsibility to get it right. And so, you know, I can say when I think the first draft are going to go to participating publishers, but how many drafts are there going to be? How long is that process going to take? I think these are unknown questions. I think we're all eager to get to a place where we have the stability of a mutually agreeable final license as soon as we can. But again, as you know, Mark, if you compare it to like an RPG book, you can rush the book and get it done, but that's not necessarily going to mean that it's maximally useful, and you could accidentally put some problems in there that you're going to have to address further down the line. So it's
worse with the legal license or contract. You can't just errata that unilaterally unless you add in a clause that lets you do that, and people are not going to be happy if you do that, because there are a lot of things you can do. If you yeah, exactly. And I think it is important. Again, the goal is to get the ORC license done so that it can be handed into the hands of someone who is financially disinterested in this whole process. So, you know, WotC, for example, and just using that as the example because it's the one that we're all familiar with, because they control the OGL, they believe they can change the OGL. And we're going to make a version that no company can change once it's done. And I fundamentally believe that's a better license for all of us to be involved in, because it takes the power out of any one of us, including, say, Paizo, right? Like you could say, wow, I love everything Erik's saying. I love everything Paizo stands for. They're the best. And then down the road, there's a change in ownership, a change in leadership, and all of a sudden you have no idea who you're dealing with. And that didn't scare anybody until about 3 weeks ago, but I guarantee you it scares the crap out of all of us now. And so that's something that we need to make sure that this new license is 100% protected against. That makes sense. Tiger Eyes for $30 said, Erik, I like your vision. Hoping ORC will be inclusive so campaign worlds like Game of Thrones, Witcher, Vampire the Masquerade, Cult, and Abomination Vault aren't excluded because of a morality clause. Then Okui Aohara / Silver Sky for $4.99 said, my hope would be an opportunity for tabletop RPGs to experiment and stretch into other fantasy genres, magical girl, modern apocalypse, superheroes, and so on.
All that stuff exists in the marketplace outside of the category leader. And just all you need to do even right now is kind of move your eyes from one section of the game store to another, and you're going to find a lot of that stuff. And hopefully in the future, the ORC license is going to allow innovations within each of those little areas to spread out and kind of help each other and lift everybody up.
Idea Master 1 for $2 said more fan and third-party content for Pathfinder 2 going forward, and you betcha. I mean, Steven and I are making it. I've seen tons of people who look like they were starting to learn it to start making it among different other 5e third-party companies, anecdotally at least.
That's great.
So you bet it.
That's
Then next, John Harrison for $5 Australian said, breaking news, wizard slain by an orc. The townsfolk cheered, all hail the orc.
Okay.
Did you do Silver Skies?
Yes.
Okay.
Cheese of Ages for $5 said, wanted to thank Erik, Mark, and the rest of the 2E devs for Pathfinder 2E. The design of the system reignited my creative passion, and I will treasure it forever.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. We're very, very proud of it. And for me, you know, there's so many angles to the story and everything that's happened over the last couple of weeks and month. I hope someday someone writes a book about this whole crazy thing, and I hope they interview me because I got a lot to say, especially, you know, 5 or 6 years from now. But yeah, the thing that's kind of like something that makes me really proud and really happy is that you, Mark, Jason Bullman, Logan Bonner, Liz Liddell, Leo Glass, who am I forgetting? There were other members of the team as well. Stephen Rodney McFarlane, of course. He came up with the three-action economy. Probably the most important innovation in the game design. So of course, Stephen, critical member of the team. You put together a version of these rules that are so smooth and so awesome. And I just love playing Pathfinder 2 every week. And what has happened over the last 6-7 days is a whole new audience has come, and they're looking for lots of, you know, they're going to find a lot of different games. And one of the games that they're going to look at, a lot of them, is Pathfinder. And I think what they're going to find, and I know what I'm going to find, is that the quality of the design and just how fun it is to play at the table, like, we are in a remarkably advantageous position because the design of Pathfinder 2 is so fun and so solid. And so there's a lot of people who maybe had no reason to look at it before, and I might have said, God, if only they knew. Well, I think a lot more people know now. And I'm really proud of what they're finding. And I think that the work that you and the team, and really the whole Paizo staff, from editors to the art team to the people who packed up those books in the warehouse and sent them to stores or to individual customers on Paizo.
And they were playtesting. Like people from
and all the playtesters in the community itself. It's all like the final version of Pathfinder 2. It is a product of all of those people, and I'm enormously proud of it. And for so many more people to get a chance to experience it and look at it and really consider it, you know, could this be the game for me? I'm really happy to be in that place, in particular because I'm so impressed by what y'all did with the rules, and I'm just so excited that more people are getting an opportunity to try it, because it is my favorite game, and it is rock solid, and I thank you for that, my friend.
Well, I am biased, but I really like it too. It has things I like in it because I put them there, I guess. But I've heard, at least anecdotally, that there who are not being able to find these books from the distributors or from Amazon. So it seems like things are going well in terms of new people checking out Pathfinder books.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in many ways is kind of the silver lining of this whole story, and I don't think in any way, shape, or form that's unique to Pathfinder or Paizo. I think there's a huge number of people out there who, prior to a couple of weeks ago, just had no real reason or desire to take on a new system or to learn a different game. And now they're looking at all kinds of stuff they've never looked at before. And a lot of those people are looking at Pathfinder, for which I'm very grateful. And I hope that they find what they're looking for. But if they don't, I hope they keep looking, because there's a lot of other great games published by a lot of other amazing publishers, those affiliated with the ORC license and not in this industry. And I think this could be a real opportunity for a lot of those people who are producing brilliant work on their own to find new audiences. And that is the silver lining here. You know, this is a time of immense disruption and fear and anxiety, but it is also a time of opportunity, and a lot of people are benefiting from that. And I think that's great.
Yeah, and people
I wonder if people who are like studying the tabletop RPG industry in the future will say this is when like a new renaissance started. And we'll never know.
We'll see.
We see.
We'll see. I mean, you know, I have been through a similar thing. You know, you kind of say, well, this is like a once in a lifetime thing. Well, it's kind of a twice in a lifetime thing for us. And I've been through it a little bit. And the reality is Dungeons and Dragons is a very powerful brand. It is a brand that many of us have long-standing association with since we were little kids. It is a brand that fundamentally, I would almost say we all kind of love, regardless of whether we love the current iteration or this or that campaign setting or who's in charge today or tomorrow or whatever. That is a huge opportunity and value that Wizards has to, you know, if they do the right things and can bring their community back, I think they stand a good chance of getting a significant number of those folks back because that connectivity to that brand is so strong. I do feel like it's a little bit different this time, perhaps, but you know, we'll see. We'll see. A lot of people who told me 8 years ago that they would never go back to D&D were playing D&D 4 years later. So we'll see what happens. But I think this is different. And I think there's a lot of people who are finding new homes and a new willingness to consider other parts of the game store, which I think is important for the whole industry.
That makes sense. Let's see how many more of these we can do. Wes Britannicus for $5 asked another one of the questions that were about a morality council and hateful content, which we already got to before. Yeah. Tiger Eyes for $10 said, Steven, Mark, Eric, Jim, personally, I believe...
Hold on. Sorry to interrupt that super chat. Please hold it, because there's another point that I want to make about the morality clause issue. And again, this is something we'll continue to discuss among the members of the project. And but I do think it's an interesting thing to think about. If the goal is to make a license that is maximally usable and limits the hassle of, you know, having to get a lawyer and going through a difficult, onerous process all the time, and it is a license that is meant to be perpetual and irrevocable and ultimately would be handed over to a nonprofit for safekeeping, who's going to be on that council? What does that even mean? How does and so there's elements of just the practicality of how such a thing would even work that I think we'll have to think through a lot more, because I think just on its face, it doesn't really make sense to me. So we'll have to find out. But that question, I think, is an important one. If there's some grand council that is overseeing everything, that kind of seems like trading one sort of person with a kill switch for 8 people with a kill switch. And I'm not really sure that's in the best interest of any of the publishers. But more importantly, I don't understand how it functions in the future. Yeah. When this thing is supposed to be eternal. So
I guess they'd have to all be at Azora Law or wherever it was sent to. But yeah,
but again, Azora Law is the temporary custodian of this process while it's being iterated. Azora Law does not want to own the OGL. We want to have no one own the OGL, or rather have a nonprofit with no vested financial interests.
So I guess they'd have to be the council. The final in the hypothetical scenario that you just stated nobody wants, that would have to be where it was. And it doesn't really, I guess,
and look, I don't want to make light of it. I know there are publishers who feel strongly about this, and they are every but as much of the coalition as everybody else, and there maybe there's an angle of this that I'm not looking at, and I'm open to that discussion, so, but I just don't really see it. And I'm deeply suspicious of limitations on the ORC license that do not exist in the current open game license that served the industry for 23 years. And so I think when we're looking at this as participants in the project, that's an area where we all should have the most level of skepticism. Like why is this more controlling than a license we were all happy to use for 20 years?
Right.
So we'll see. Maybe there's good answers to that question, and I'm open to it, but I don't know them right now off the top of my head.
Tiger Eyes for $10 said, Steven, Mark, Eric, Jim, personally, I believe RPG community and tabletop RPGs should be inclusive, open, and welcoming, but it's possible that all campaigns are not for all ages.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. Alexandra Lemele said that Pathfinder 2E has spoiled me with the 3 action economy and degrees of success. With that said, I can't go back to Starfinder. That seems to have been more related to the things that you were saying before, Eric, about how you really like those killer apps.
Yeah.
They
And
then
I'm not the
directly
only one.
ask about Starfinder 2E, which I'm sure you can't possibly give any comment on.
I'm too smooth to answer that question, man.
Too
On camera, I can't. We're not. And
Yeah.
the honest answer is we're not there. You know, but certainly gotten a lot of interesting suggestions over the last couple of weeks, and I do like giving people what they ask me for.
Mm-hmm. So then someone who's like an N dash that's formed out of two regular sized dashes for $2 said odds to get Wolfgang on Roll for Combat to talk about Black Flag soon.
I don't know. I can ask Wolfgang.
That one's for you, Steven.
Yeah, I'll ask Wolfgang, see if he wants to join us.
Yeah, I mean,
might as well.
We'd be happy to have him.
Yeah.
That is an important member of the ORC license coalition.
Yeah.
So I'm also eager to hear what he has to say, because it's very likely he'll be publishing it under the license we're all working on together.
Yeah, I'll reach out.
Kobold's on one of that, and that initial list that you put out on the very first blog, that was Paizo, Kobold, Green Ronin, and Legendary Games, Roll for Combat, and Rogue Genius. I think I don't want to have missed anyone.
I think that's correct.
I think that was everyone who was in that initial.
Yeah. And you can kind of see how quickly that came together, because it's mostly clients of Azora Law, personal friends of mine, and people who are Pathfinder, supporters. So with like 3 hours, that's the coalition I can put together. With 8 days, that's the coalition I can put together. And it's growing all the time.
That's huge. Brian Bowersocks said, I found Starfinder while searching for a replacement for D20 Modern. I love the Adventure Pass, and I look forward to whatever future announcements.
Awesome. Yeah, Starfinder is a huge part of our company and our plans, and some of my favorite people to work with in the entire company. And yeah, I mean, it's great. It's fun to publish more than one genre. And so there you go.
Troy Neenan said, just bought Kobold Press Deep Magic classes, would get a hardcover, but shipping costs are wild. Can you do business with overseas printing presses?
Well, I can't speak for Kobold's products. I think it's less about printing presses and more about distribution centers and drop shipping and all kinds of stuff like that. I would love for Paizo, for example, to be big enough that we'd had like a European office that could handle some of that kind of stuff. We're not there, Despite being allegedly a major corporation, Paizo is not that big.
Yes, you are a major corporation.
A major corporation, yes. Allegedly. I mean, I don't know if that is about us, but oh my God.
I mean, who would it be if it wasn't you?
I'm sure I couldn't speculate.
Oh yeah, okay. Fair enough. Let's see. What was the next one? It looked like there was a little bit of a gap.
Troy Nennen said, just bought Kobold Press Deep Magic classes. Oh, that's the one we just talked about.
Yeah, I already did that.
Warwolf sent $2 super chat. Hugs for everyone at Paizo, and thanks for ORC. There you go.
You're welcome. But again, to be clear, ORC is bigger than Paizo. It's not a Pathfinder license. We hope to use it with the Pathfinder SRD, but we're looking forward to all the other companies that will also be contributing SRDs as we move forward together on a new licenses for the entire industry. It's not a Paizo thing. We've definitely taken a leadership role and are handling the promotion of it, but it's very clear. And I think the more this becomes a industry license and the less it's seen as like a Paizo license or something like that, the better it's going to be for everybody. So again, one of the people who wants to get this finished and in the hands of a nonprofit as soon as possible is us, because this is not a Paizo thing. This is an industry thing.
Nate Marcel said, really interested in what Goodman Games is saying. FYI, great stuff. Want to make art for you and work for you guys. So cool. There you go.
Yep. Then James Thatcher for $2 said, is there going to be a list of ORC publishers? I know the blog had at least a sampling of ORC publishers.
Yeah, so I mean the kind of the story there is like not particularly interesting, and it's just that the initial letter that Azora sent out to industry contacts that was the get the ball rolling for the sign up for this thing, that it doesn't say Do you agree to publicly pledge your support behind this license? It's more just, do you want to be involved in the process? And we know, because it was very important to me as a publisher to make sure that we were respectful of everybody. We reached out and talked to everybody on that list, with a couple of exceptions of people who were offering their full-throated support in public anyway. And it was like, they're already on the record. There are some people involved in the process that are taking a very understandable kind of wait and see, yeah, keep me involved. Love to maybe give some ideas, but will we use it or not? I don't know. I mean, I can almost guarantee, I think I can guarantee you that not every single person, even on today's list, are going to ultimately use the ORC. They might want it in their bag of tricks if it makes sense for a given release. They might have a vested interest in its development. But will everyone use it? I don't know. I mean, I think it's super critical that people understand this is not 60 publishers coming forward and out of 1,500 and saying, we're using it, because it's not written yet. What we are pledging ourselves to is working together on the development of the license. And that's a very important distinction I want to make sure everyone understands.
That makes sense. So we should probably have people stop sending new super chats, I'm guessing, based on the timing. I will try to get through some more of them. Hillis Mallory was wondering if ORC could provide third-party material for the organized play in the future.
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time? I
was wondering if ORC
could
provide third-party material for the organized play in the future.
Could ORC provide third-party material for organized play? I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I'll just make up an interpretation and answer that. Would let's say some company releases, say the bulk of their mechanical content as part of their SRD, and that company also makes short 4 to 5 hour scenarios similar to, say, what Pathfinder Society does, or maybe D&D Adventures League, just as a format, right? Could you use those rules to create a similar type of product that delivered a similar type of format and experience as an organized play scenario? I think you probably could. Would that mean that then that play would be sanctioned in the official campaign, and that you would have whatever documentation that campaign might have for treasure, and that it get plugged into however you're tracking the... No, I mean, no. So I may very well be misunderstanding the question, and if so, I apologize, but
it probably was the second one, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Of getting,
could you use it to like do like a
official
bootleg? Yeah,
or even
probably...
the official.
I don't know. I don't want to speculate anymore.
I figured you wouldn't. I was surprised you even fielded it to that extent.
Well, there you go.
So,
if it's a super chat, someone spent a little money on it. So I want to honor that by at least trying to give an answer.
We got a $50 one from Jimmy Arms that I want to skip to because we don't have a huge amount of time before you have to go, Eric. It was, as long as the nonprofit that was not set up by the publisher, like what is trying to be set up by the upcoming Humble Bundle. It was kind of sentence fragments, and I'm not like super sure what it's saying.
I don't know anything about that. I honestly don't. The Humble Bundle side of this is an interesting one. I understand there is a open gaming Humble Bundle that's been promoted as dropping soon, or is it already up? I'm not exactly sure. Time has lost most meaning here. Paizo's not affiliated with that bundle because we already had a bundle set up prior to this whole thing going down very shortly thereafter. So in an effort not to and we have a lot of stuff we want to contribute to it, so I didn't want to kind of drown out someone else's bundle, so to speak. But I know there are a number of affiliated publishers that are doing some open gaming related Humble Bundle in the very near future, but I don't know the mechanism or the charity or any of that kind of stuff because Paizo's not involved.
That makes sense.
Support it. I support those companies. In fact, I support any business that's going to support anyone in the tabletop RPG industry in this really chaotic time, but I don't have any information about that.
That makes sense. So Steph L for 999s was reassured and said, hearing Eric's explanations and comments on everything professional and personal already make me much more assured than anything that's come from WotC. Hopeful for the TTRPG future. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Eric S. Riley for $5 said, someone get Ben Riggs from Slaying the Dragon on the phone to get this story down. I mean, we've had him on the show before.
Yep, we had Ben on the show.
I really do think that there's and maybe it's just the fog of the moment and being kind of very close to the epicenter of the events of the last couple of weeks. But I really think we're seeing a fascinating sort of business story playing out here. And I suspect there will be papers and books and things written about it, because it's not like anything I've ever seen before.
Yeah, I'm
not even close. People have said like, wow, like lucky you. It's, last time this happened back in, 2008 or whatever with the GSL, Pathfinder was successful, and it looks like it's happening again. And it's like, this is not that. This is a different deal entirely. And so how it's going to all end up and what things are going to look like 3 days from now, let alone, a year or two from now, who knows? In a hurricane of chaos, the best thing that we can do is stick to our principles and do what we think is right. And right now, that's what's kind of guiding
all right,
most of my day and most of my effort.
I've been trying to guess ahead of time, like which questions you would answer in depth or short, or like dance a little bit.
I got a few
not
left.
answer. And this next question, I think, is the one you're least likely to have the answer to. So
okay, great.
Wow.
Let's hear it.
We don't have that many
Mr.
left.
Davey Smith for $5 Canadian says, Nanosite sheath mode, visible, invisible, or as desired. Also, thank you so much for Orc. I spent $100 on Paizo in response.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you.
Starfinder
not
question.
having the kind of depth of knowledge that, say, Thurston Hillman, our creative director for Starfinder, who's in the room right now, really have Thirsty answer that question, and I think that'd be for the best. But
for all I would know,
say,
he might have.
All information aside, the answer was invisible, not invisible, or what was
visible, not invisible,
or
visible, invisible, or as desired.
I'm going to say as desired, because part of an RPG is to roll with what you want, not necessarily what it says.
There you go. I'm going to remind anyone watching that Paizo's policy is that only either errata or something that is put out by the official team that makes that game is considered an official clarification.
Yeah, that's not an official.
Without even looking at it, is not legal at your Starfinder
Oh
Society table.
It was so funny because, last weekend there was so many people being introduced to Pathfinder for the first time, and online, lots of questions and lots of people's first impressions of the system, which is fascinating and exciting to read. But my staff, is like all caught up in it, and they're like, everyone gets a free hero point this weekend. And then other people are like, yeah, free hero point this weekend. And like, we're giving like 5 free hero points to people. And I had to come in and say, guys, you're breaking our game. Come on, this weekend only. So yeah, that kind of unofficial errata has had a real impact on Pathfinder play environment over the last 7 days. That's for sure.
You can only have like 3 at a time, so.
Well,
no.
Tell it to my staff, man.
You can have as many as you want. It's just, I think, right?
No, I think it's 3.
Is there an actual cap?
I think there's a limit. Yeah.
If ever there was a time for people to learn about hero points and how they work, I think this weekend was the perfect time. So it all worked out for the best.
I think a lot of people were taking heroic actions recently. So Dr. Abigail for $5 Australian said, I love Pathfinder 2e so much. I bought 2 core rule books, one for me as GM and one for the table. Please keep up the great work. P.S. Guesstimate is not a word.
Okay. Good to know. I
right.
like the comic book collector kind of like one for you to read and one you got a bag and board. Your second copy of all of the Pathfinder rulebooks. Critical.
Yeah,
actually, if you'd done that, apparently someone was trying to get $400 for a Pathfinder core rulebook once Amazon sold out. So maybe that bagged and boarding strategy for all of our core rules would have really paid off in this twice in a lifetime event.
You saw my eBay listing. Thanks. Oh, sorry.
Just do it. Just buy more. No, don't do it. Don't do it. June Solar for $5 said, time to take out the old True to the Game original Paizo t-shirt about supporting TTRPGs, period.
Man, that's a great shirt. That was back when we put Warduke, the old action figure, from the D&D LJN toy line on a cover of Dungeon. I want to say probably 105, Wayne Reynolds painting of Warduke. And when I got real excited about that idea, there were others involved in the decision chain who were like, no one knows who that is. What a dumb idea. And then when I finally became editor-in-chief, it was my first official act was to order that cover that I'd wanted, for 5 months prior to that or whatever. And I'm happy to say that the philosophy of honoring the history of the D&D brand and some of the cool little elements has been a core strategy for 5th edition that's really worked for them. So I'm glad that that everybody kind of got on board eventually, because it's nice to be right.
So for $5 Troy Neenan said, remember, D&D was deemed a devil-worshipping game. Morality changes every day, and if this orc is set in stone, you better be able to see 100 years in future.
I think he meant years.
I think he meant years. And yeah, I don't know if I can see 100 years in the future, but I'm pretty good at seeing a couple of weeks in the future.
Which is like 100 years week. For these last 2 weeks. The Duke of Awesome, 10 Canadian dollars, started Pathfinder 2 around the time it came out. We'll never go back. You guys rock. Orc.
That is why they call him the Duke of Awesome. Great judgment.
So Yarnev for $5 retracted a message.
Oh dear.
Do you
give it the $5 back? Because I don't know how this stuff works.
He actually did do it later. He wrote, is Open RPG going to work on a better logo than D20? Maybe an orc head? That's the question.
I mean, the Open RPG license has a logo, and maybe the community will say, let's revise the logo. That's possible.
You heard it here first. Start submitting your logos of orc heads.
No. I honestly do not. I think here's me again, just Eric, just talking among friends here. I think a more neutral logo that isn't shaped like an orc's head or something like that would find a more fitting home on a variety of games and products that have lots of different artistic styles and subject matter. If I was making a modern detective game or something like that, I'm not sure a big orc head is what I want on my product.
Or World War II or a magical girl, and you just have this orc head on there.
By the way, I'm going to call out Vanessa Hoskins, who says it's on a hexagon. Hexagons are the bestagons, and if you don't know what that's reference to, look it up on YouTube. It's awesome.
Okay,
trust me, you'll like it.
So Mr. Blawface for $5 said, I personally think every time someone says orc, we need to chant orc, orc, orc.
I want to see Mr. Blawface go up against Captain Awesome or whatever, Corporal Amazing from a couple of questions ago and see what happens there. But yeah, I'm all for chants.
Well, you know what? We do have Drax and Ant-Man on the show today, so.
Right. Boy, what a that was kind of a battle cry, that video. Oof. I think that I don't know if you guys got jazzed up by that, but
I only watched it 10,000 times.
Yeah. Pretty fun to watch.
It is fun.
And you got to be Ant-Man.
Yeah.
I'm just honored to be, a part of the story.
Apocalypso for $10. I've been working on a new system for over a year and plan on launching in September. Will ORC be open for newbie publishers, or is it only for established publishers?
Yeah, of course. It's going to be open for everybody. It has to be. If it's not open for everybody, it's not open, period. You can't just call a license an open game license if it, A, doesn't have mechanisms for opening content for other people to use, and B, it's available for everybody. Come on. Yes. Jump on board. The ORC Alliance is a welcoming alliance. We want everybody. And we'd love to have you. The dream of saying one day I'd like to be in the RPG business and I've got a cool idea and I think other people would like it. Open game licenses allow you to create material that is going to be of interest to existing fan communities, which is going to make it more likely that you're going to find success with your first idea. So absolutely, yes, we welcome brand new publishers. I think, I certainly hope, and in fact, I would say my business is in some ways counting on the ORC license being ready by September. So we hope to have you on board with your first release if we can.
That makes sense. I mean, Gen Con is going to happen.
It'd be nice to have a product at Gen Con. Yeah. Which
Captain
ironically is kind of how this, for Paizo, is kind of how Pathfinder started in the first place. It's like, we got to have a product at Gen Con. What do you got for us? Well, nothing. Well, okay. You know, I mean, really, that's your super Cliffs Notes version. And here we are again.
That was a lot faster than when we asked Ryan Dancy to explain what was going on in Times. That was a super Cliffs Notes version.
Well, there you go. There you go.
So Captain Relic the Brass Dragon for $2 said more Q&As in future for Pathfinder.
Sure, of course. Yeah, why not?
If you have questions for Pathfinder, just come over to the Roll for Combat Discord channel.
Yeah,
we got
Mark.
Yeah, you could ask Mark right now, we're there all the time, and not even us, the community. You know, the fun thing is, the nice thing about Paizo players and Pathfinder and Starfinder players is everyone has the stereotype of us as we're being almost too nice and so helpful, and they're finding out just how helpful we are. You have questions, people will go out of their way to tell you and speak to you about the games of Paizo.
That gives me an opening to say something that I'd like to say about that, which is I want to thank all of the members of the Pathfinder community, from players to, you know, hosts of shows like this one, all the way from the person with the biggest reach all the way to the person who just joined social media yesterday to share their love of our game. The welcoming spirit that you have shown all these new players is really, really meaningful. And you know, like a lot of RPGs, having someone who you can kind of count on to tell you some of the rules and explain the bits that maybe don't 100% make sense to you on first blush, such a critical part of this. The game rules in the world of Pathfinder are part of what makes Pathfinder special, but it's the community of players and that makes it all possible. And so by welcoming new people into that community, you all are doing the necessary work to create an environment where the network of Pathfinder players is larger in general, which makes it easier for people to pick up games, which makes it easier for stores to carry those games. That's what it's all about, and not about just me, about all these other games that people are discovering. But I want to talk specifically to the Pathfinder people who have been so welcoming and so helpful to the new community. The Pathfinder 2e subreddit has been just a joy to watch and participate in over the last couple of weeks. We got staff in there every day answering questions, so I want to thank staff as well. They've been amazing ambassadors for our brand, and it's just like the more the merrier. We welcome new players to Pathfinder. I welcome if it doesn't work out and it's not your deal, great. Please check out some of the other games by some of the other publishers that are affiliated with the ORC license effort, or people who aren't. You know, there's tons of great games out there. There's definitely a game that is aimed directly toward what you're looking for. You just got to look around and find it. And it's just been great to see both that that's happening more often, and then in particular, the members of my community, the Pathfinder community, have been doing such a great job to welcome those new people. So just from me to you, thank you all for participating in that and showing people what a great game Pathfinder is, and more importantly, what a welcoming and wonderful community it is.
So a human gave 10 Polish zlotys and said, will ORC license support making apps and computer games, video games like OGL 1.0a?
I hope so. Like I said, I don't really love the idea of making the new version of the license more restrictive than the others. But again, to be clear, it's not an Erik license. It's not a Paizo license. There may be other people who have different perspectives that they want to share, and we'll talk about those things as a community and make the decisions that we feel are in the best interests of the participating publishers and the community itself. So I can give you my personal opinion, which is that I hope there's not limits to that kind of stuff. We'll see.
So this is perhaps, the next one is perhaps my favorite one, because it just is a response to a previous super chatted, not to us. Brian Bowersocks for $2 said, guesstimate is a word. It's in the dictionary.
Oh! You cannot have like a pedantry war amongst a bunch of gamers. It's just not going to work, right? Someone's going to call you out on your fact, right?
Mhm.
Brandon Reynolds for $2 said, Eric, let me tell you about my character. Then
Wow, you look interested. He's like, yeah, tell us.
Come on.
Yeah.
Well, if he's
There you go.
giving you guys like $2 for every sentence, I'll milk that out for you, just for you. Don't tell me.
There
more.
you go. There you
Tell
go.
us more about your character. These roll for combat guys got to eat. They haven't been offline since 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, there is that. So I think it's why you hate 10 with like an A instead of an I says, how can we spread the glory of the orc?
I think social media is the best way. I think sharing, for example, the announcement that we made today showing the coalition of 60 publishers, that's just a subsample of the 1,500 plus. I mean, this is, by the way, like, I have so many friends in the industry, like, who I couldn't fit on that list, and I could have made another list just as impressive as that one, and it's not really a reflection of the value to the program or anything like that. We need small publishers as well as big publishers, as well as old school publishers, as well as cutting edge new folks. It's like we're all in this together, and so I welcome everybody to the coalition. And you can help by sharing our communiques, by evangelizing the ORC license, and by talking to the publishers you do support and encouraging them to participate. Many of them probably already do.
For the glory of the orc, would you also recommend like shouting at your gods, spitting in their face, and leaping into the afterlife with weapons drawn? Or is that just more of a Golarian orc thing?
I think that on matters of faith, I leave it between people and their own conscience, and they should do what they feel is right.
Fair enough.
Brandon actually
Captain
had
Relic, the Black Brass Dragon, asked another question that was, let's see, it said, Battle Zoo dragons are not allowed in Pathfinder Society. Official Pathfinder version of Dragonborn?
No. I will say this. For 23 years, in addition to being extraordinarily you call it generous, call it understanding of mutual self-interest, whatever, Wizards was an innovator in this space by introducing the open game license in the first place. And in doing so, they had a small list of creatures that they said, these are ours, please don't use these. The Beholder, the Mind Flayer, anyone in this space who's published can tell you the whole list off the top of their head. And for the entire time that Pathfinder has existed, we have honored those requests, and we have made no attempt whatsoever to create like a floating winker monster with 8 tentacles, or a tentacle beard slayer or whatever. That fair enough, and Dragonborn, that's something D&D created. I have no interest in trying to.
Hey man, but you want to use Battle Zoo Ancestry Dragons in Pathfinder Society.
But even that, I don't think it would be appropriate to say that's your version of Dragonborn. That's your version of draconic, heritage and literal dragons, right? So, it's not. This isn't about just like filing the serial numbers off of D&D and calling it a day. So I think on that stuff that is, we're not going to do a Dragonborn. That's not ours.
So Pony Flair for $2 Canadian said, orcs and second word starting with O with a blank in it, RPG when?
Well, people are doing like, it's like D&D, so O and O. So someone had omelets and orcs. Omelets and orcs. See where we're going with this? What would your
it's clever.
Yes, clever.
Super clever.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't want to get into that, but fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Omelets and
orcs. You never know.
Go for it.
There you go. Omelets and orcs. Brandon Reynolds for $5 says, I'll tell you at Paizo.com or PaizoCon. That's probably PaizoCon.
PaizoCon. Yep.
I'll tell you at PaizoCon.
He's going to tell you all about his character. There you go.
There you go. So you will now get to find out about the character.
Except it's all
Captain
online
Relic,
now.
The Brass
Sad face.
Dragon for $5 said, it was nice to have my concern with the Forced Dragonkin Bond SRS rule looked into, since I wanted to play a character who refuses to make a bond.
I will nod sagely and pretend I understood even a third of that.
That's
Okay.
more of a Mark thing. That was a rules type question.
Oh,
So
Okay.
Missy Ovison for $2 said, I'm a new publisher and joined the Orc Discord.
Great. It's kind of moving rapidly today. So, I think maybe I don't know. I've got like just a fraction of it open under the screen right now, and it's just like. So I'm going to have to, right after this, probably spend 2 hours just catching up on the conversation. It's lively. It's exciting. It's interesting.
So Storm Brave Tail for $2 said, where's the tiny murder clown at, Mona?
Tiny Murder Clown is my character in the Glass Cannon Network's Strange Eons game that they are running. And he, thus far, has made only appearances during their live touring shows when I happen to be around. And so I am very confident that the Tiny Murder Clown will make a return probably at a convention near you, and then the recorded stream. They did just for some of their Patreons release a little Twitch icon of me looking maniacal. He is a clownish sort of gnome hungry ghost monk that is a really intensely stupid character that was intended to just be a one-off burn on one of the other players' characters who died the session before, but people for some reason liked my stupid little voice, and so now he's made a handful of appearances, and I'm sure he will appear again. So he sticks around like gum on the bottom of your shoe. So
Paul Lee for 2,000 Costa Rican colon, which is apparently just under $4. So,
all right.
2E, 3E player here. Thanks for your work saving OGL.
Good job.
I appreciate it. The reality is we hope to create something that's significantly better than the OGL, and because it will be irrevocable and it will find a home that is outside the ownership of the shifting interests of any one of us. And that in and of itself, even if that is the only difference, and otherwise all the terms are identical, that is a 2 full letter grade improvement over what we have right now. I wouldn't have necessarily thought so a month ago, but I definitely think so now.
So let's finish up super chats, and then I will have one last
are there a lot more
question.
Left?
Yeah, we only got like 4 left.
So Lee Kessner, $5 said, I'm so glad I took a break from wrestling to break the rust off my Photoshop and Illustrator skills. Erik, are you interested in an orc t-shirt design that I am working on?
Maybe. That has been one of the things I've actually seen come up a lot over the last few days, is like, when are you guys going to do orc merch? And my response has kind of been like, let me write the welcome letter to participating publishers before we worry about merch. But yeah, there's some questions about that. It'd be fun to do something. Shoot me an email with a cool design and maybe we'll make it. I don't know.
Oh, and Linda, who's in chat, got the answer to that very obscure sounding Dragonkin Bond question.
I believe it.
During today's SFS meeting.
Awesome.
So it sounds like that's covered. Nick P for $5 said, will Pathfinder 1E get a revision or coverage under Orc? It's my favorite system and I would love to keep playing under Roll20, etc. Very nervous.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it other than that I think there probably is reason to be nervous about it. We could go through and kind of try to clone it, I guess. I'm not sure that for our company that would be a very wise investment of time and effort. But there are other companies, Legendary Games, Rogue Genius, others that are to this day producing content to support Pathfinder First Edition. If Wizards does what they say they're going to do, which is to deauthorize 1.0A, and if the current version of their evolving OGL is only hooked to the 5.1 version of the SRD, it's difficult for me right now to understand how someone might be able to, with no fear at all, publish material for Pathfinder 1, which is a huge bummer. I'm hoping that through the feedback process that Wizards has put together for their new iterations of the OGL, that they listen to the feedback that their customers are giving them with pretty resounding unity that the OGL 1.0A cannot be revoked and that shouldn't be revoked. So I think there's possibly still a world where they don't revoke it. I don't know. I can no longer count on that world existing for my own business. And I've got some real issues with when there's a common understanding that has been stated clearly from the beginning that has lasted for 23 years, and then really anyone comes around and says, no, actually we meant this or whatever, and then you know what was meant the first time around, does create some trust issues. And so I really do hope that Wizards, because no matter what, there's going to be millions of people playing D&D, right? D&D is huge. And, you know, one of the things that I find particularly unfortunate about the current situation that I suspect Wizards of the Coast also finds particularly unfortunate is the possibility that the controversy that's been created over the last couple of weeks starts to impact their movie that's coming out in a couple of months, which, you know, on the one hand, if you put yourself in the role of someone who's very upset by these choices, and you might say, well, that's justice and that's great, but the reality is there are dozens, if not scores, of tabletop gaming publishers who have Hollywood deals and developments with major studios or with minor studios, or simply have the ambition that one day the idea that they're coming up with in their single proprietor company in their garage might one day be something that could have an entertainment project associated with it. The D&D movie is going to be the bellwether for Hollywood as to whether tabletop projects are worth pursuing at all. So in a world where that movie significantly underperforms, I don't know that that's possible. I don't know that this controversy lasts that long, but I'm sort of like worst case scenarioing. That's going to hurt everybody bad. I had a major licensing deal with a toy manufacturer that is a household name that everyone knows, that was exploring getting into iterating their very popular toy design with some tabletop properties, and naturally started kind of at the top and also experimented with some of the mid-tier brands in the category. And they were going to bring out Pathfinder ones of whatever this thing may have been. And the similar products that they had released for a couple of other very high profile brands in the space they underperformed. And based on the underperformance of their first foray, they then went and canceled all of the projects that they had on deck for anything related to tabletop, because the conclusion that they came to at the time was there's just not enough money in tabletop. So if that D&D movie flops, that's real bad, because that is going to reflect on agents and studios' willingness to greenlight other entertainment properties that are derived from tabletop games. I'm hoping, there's a part of me that hopes that, like, no, there's not a part of me. My whole body emphatically hopes that that doesn't happen, but it might. And that would be yet another bummer for pretty much everyone coming out of this whole situation. So kind of like every day I think of a new angle of this thing and it gets a little more frustrating. And that is the one I'm kind of currently focused on a little bit, is I understand why people want to aim their ire in that direction. And I don't think there's anything you can do to stop it probably at this point, but it's going to have an impact on all of us, just as all of these decisions are having an impact on all of us. We all exist within we all exist within the ecosystem of tabletop gaming, whether we think we do or not. And the decisions that we make, and sometimes the successes that we have, or even the failures that we have, impact everyone's ability. And when and so I don't want to, that's kind of a sideline and I don't want to focus too much on it, but it is something that I've thought about a little bit over the last couple of days. Is what a bummer. What a bummer, because a lot of those studios are not going to be paying close attention to the controversy. And again, maybe the movie does gangbusters and I'll be happy, because it's going to be good for those projects. But if it doesn't do gangbusters, it's gonna kill all those projects, and that'll be a huge bummer for everybody.
Well, it might be a sideline, but I think our viewers are probably really interested just how much you've been thinking about it the past few days anyway. It was a very interesting answer.
Well, the funny thing is, Mark, when you're riddled with anxiety and you can't sleep anymore, you have a lot more time to think about a lot of things.
Yeah, I know that too. And it's not always a good thing, but it does give you a lot of thinking time. Captain
It gives
Relic,
you a lot of time to talk to old friends as well.
That's true. For $2, Captain Relic clarified that SRS in that kind of confusing question was SFS, Starfinder Society, which I kind of thought it would be, but given that SRO is a species in
it's kind of confusing.
Starfinder,
right?
which was also only one letter off of being that, and it was a species-based question, I couldn't be sure. But now we do know what that one is. And did I?
There's basically there's only two left. There's two left. I'll go through them super quick. Access your inner light. Then $5 says, will there be morality or obscenity clauses in ORC, or will we be able to cater to a variety of moral backgrounds? You answered the question for about 10 minutes. It's one of the first questions, so go way back to the beginning.
Yeah.
The long answer is watch that. The short answer is no. There you go.
Yeah. Short answer is I don't think so.
Yes.
You know, that we're just gathering now and everybody's got their own ideas, and I'm looking forward to having that conversation. But my preference as someone who's used the license for 23 years is that if there is a mechanism for protecting your brand, that mechanism should be associated with agreements that have anything to do with your brand. And I don't think the ORC license has much to do with your brand, at least directly, because it's about the mechanics. And stuff like a compatibility license, or possibly a mechanism related to the SRD, which is like the basic version of your rules that you contribute as a corpus of open game content. Maybe there's a mechanism in there. There's a lot of lawyers involved in the coalition. There's a lot of ideas, a lot of really brilliant people, and maybe there's a way for those companies who don't want there to be anything like that to be able to contribute a totally free SRD. And maybe there's a way for those companies that are concerned about that to have a little bit more control. I really don't know. We'll have to talk about it. But I think the idea of like, there's going to be some kind of grand council that decides what is and isn't offensive. And I personally don't see how such a thing would work. And given that it hasn't been part of the open game license, it's worked for everybody for 23 years. It's hard to understand why that would be a top priority of this project. But again, I am just me. It is not my license. So we'll see.
And then we have
final round. Paul Lee.
Yes.
5,000 Costa Rican Cologne this time says, I stand corrected. Thanks for all the hard work saving the spirit of the gaming and gaming publishing world, and not just the OGL, for all current and future players.
That's the goal. And that's the goal. That's the one thing everyone involved can agree on. So if we keep our eyes on the prize and keep focused on that, I think it's going to be very easy for us to be successful in that goal.
So let's wrap this up, since you probably want to go eat, and a few quick things, and then I'm going to ask the final question that you answered beforehand, but it was such a good answer, we're going to make you answer it again. First of all, do like and subscribe, and next week we have Linda Codega from Gizmodo, and IO9, who pretty much broke the story after us, but broke it in print. And we will talk all about the crazy weeks they've been having, because they have been just cranking out story after story. So that should be a
for sure
fascinating discussion. And as for my question is, where did ORC come from? And tell me about their redemption.
Well, the idea, so it's just kind of interesting how, you can say art imitates life, but sometimes life kind of imitates art. And what I mean by that is, when we were doing the second edition of the Pathfinder role-playing game a few years ago, one of the things that we wanted to address is taking a look at elements of our setting that were created originally in 2005 or 2006, and really kind of looking at them and saying, are there ways that we can update the setting to make it a little bit more modern. We have a much more diverse, a younger staff than we had when we first set out, and that brings interesting perspectives as well. And I think that the poor maligned orc, has gone from sort of a speed bump cannon fodder, it's kind of okay just to wipe them out sort of creature from the very earliest days of the hobby. There's a lot of people who have said, that an orcs deserve a better deal, right? No real culture is 100% evil. Some of the coding of orcs has been, to coin a phrase, problematic and sort of offensive to some people, because they see some of the traits of orcs in common literature as being analogs to people of color, indigenous people in particular. And so looking at that and knowing that we have in our world the hold of Belkzen, which is an orc nation, and in the original Pathfinder stuff, pretty by the book kind of orc nation, who served essentially as cannon fodder for this undead lich called the Whispering Tyrant, one of the big bad enemies, the super wizard who lives on an island in the middle of a lake near Belkzen, and he would just sort of make.
Does he live on the coast of that island or in the exact center?
I'd have to check the map, but he's definitely lake adjacent. And the idea that we had with the second edition, where we were kind of updating the timeline, is that the Whispering Tyrant, this evil wizard, comes back and commands his orcs to do exactly what he wants. And in this case, the orcs said, no, we're not your army. We're not your thralls. We are people, and we have our own goals and our own ambitions. And so Paizo's orcs have been on kind of a redemption arc since the early days of talking about what we wanted to do with second edition. And this is something even before the last month we were looking forward into getting into a little bit, because there's quite a lot of work to be done to add, additional elements to their culture and make them really a living, breathing culture, and not just sort of a cardboard cutout or a quick sketch of the other or whatever. And so that's work that we're pretty deeply engaged and excited about. And when this came around and you sort of say, okay, open RPG license, ORL, that's not a great acronym. And it was Jim Butler, our president, who said, what if it was open RPG creative license, and that could be the orc? And I think that was a great idea. I think it's helped with the promulgation of the message, because it's easy to say, it's kind of fun, maybe even it's a little bit funny, but it really does kind of come back in some ways to, or at least it parallels what orcs are going through in their own sort of arc in our world, which is not necessarily being told exactly what it is that the wizard wants them to do. And I just think that's kind of an interesting parallel, perhaps.
Yeah, there's some weird parallels. Like when the Whispering Tyrant is just assumed the orcs were just kind of join in like they did the last time, and they're like, no, we're going to work together with everybody else. So there's some weird things in there. Yeah,
I just think it's interesting. Just a kind of a very minor sidelight of this story, but it's just a kind of an interesting little footnote. And I think the poor orc has been maligned and for long enough, and it's time for the orcs to stand up for themselves and to band together and do what needs to be done. So that's what we're doing.
So orc is basically I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore redemption.
I guess, but again, I think there's a little bit of danger in saying that this is an emotional response, or that this is like, even honestly, it's kind of like the one thing I don't love about it is like, it's for me increasingly as each day goes on and as we continue to work on the orc license, I don't want to say I don't care about what is happening with the OGL, because I think there's lots of decisions that they can make that would benefit the whole community. And we're seeing some steps in that direction, I think, already, but I think they're tentative steps. And I think that the most important thing is the feedback everyone's giving them, which is that the open game license 1.0A is not revocable. It was never intended to be revocable. And the advice that we got from that company for 20 years was that it was not revocable. So obviously the easiest thing for them to do is to back off on that. But I don't expect them to do that for a variety of reasons. And it's kind of becoming, at least in terms of Pathfinder, I'm always open to new opportunities and whatever, but at least in terms of Pathfinder, it's more about controlling our own fate. It's more about not allowing the possibility of someone to come in and change the deal. And that is why the independent ownership of the final version of the ORC license is so critical. It's really, I think, kind of the whole thing. And so it's like, what can any publisher do to create their own version of a license to give you a safe harbor to use just their game that they will always have the ability to change? It's kind of increasingly irrelevant to me. And I think it's kind of increasingly irrelevant to a lot of people involved in this conversation. What we know is that we need to have something that protects our interests and that is truly irrevocable. And anything else is kind of just a non-starter at this point. So I'm focusing my energy not on being frustrated about, the change or like obsessing over the minutia of each little, temporary or not temporary, but, any kind of walk back from a small one to a big one. It's just like, it's good. And I wish them the best, but I can't stick around. I won't, because we have to move forward and we have to be able to have the confidence that the deals that we're working on and that the products that we're publishing work with a license that is truly irrevocable, because otherwise it doesn't work. It doesn't work and it can't work. And so rather than kind of wait for other people to do it right, we're just going to do it ourselves.
Yeah, it's funny. There's another parallel from Golarian Orcs, right? Because you said it's not just emotional. There's like more of a thinking, cerebral aspect to it. And Ardax, the white hair, the leader of Orcs in Belkzen nowadays, was the former major domo and advisor who is actually a middle-aged orc who thought things through a lot and is not your stereotype of just like going off on an emotion and making a decision. So why are there so many weird parallels to Golarian Orcs that predated reality?
Don't you miss conversations like
middle-aged?
I mean, I don't know, Eric. You're the only one who said that you were Ardak. I didn't say that you were Ardak.
Oh, I see.
The movement was
right.
Ardak
it's that messianic
it
complex that I have. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
But you said it, not
I
me.
guess. Yeah.
you don't you miss these conversations, Eric?
I do. It's a joy to talk to Mark again. And Stephen, it's always a joy to talk to you. I have to commend Roll for Combat. You guys have been out in front of this story you were covering this story very early. And
we broke it.
You've been
actually.
Well, yeah, and you've been at the forefront of coverage. And I just, got to give you guys kudos. This is a big story and you've been on it from the beginning. And I've learned a lot just by watching your streams and some of the really insightful guests that you've had, everyone but me, that you've had, I think has really brought some important contribution to the conversation. And I think that, at the end of the day, when we look at how this story developed and where it went, I do think Roll for Combat, you guys have been a big part of it, and kudos for that because it's important.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's important. It's, as we said, it's a big part of people's lifestyle. I mean, I know many people who have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games a week. I have 2 myself. I have friends that play almost every single day, and for years, years and years, decades, this is a major part of their life. And waking up one day and realizing that one person, one company seems to think that they have the power to destroy that is a wake-up call, I think, to everyone. And suddenly something you thought that was safe and cozy and can never go away might just go away. And it's humbling, and I think everyone has suddenly gotten very, very good at understanding OGL and legal contracts, and people are learning quite a bit. Yep. So
it's humbling, but I think that it's also tremendously empowering. And I think that we need to understand that the future is brighter with a vibrant industry with lots of different trees in the forest and not just one really beautiful plant in a walled garden.
Couldn't have said it better myself. With that, let's wrap it up. Otherwise, we can be
It's
here
a great ending.
all day and all night. And
it's easy to get Erik to talk because he's so passionate and excited about making this happen for the industry that anytime we have even a small question, he gives us like 3 answers that are all really insightful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully people have enjoyed it. It's definitely been an honor to be a guest.
I didn't read it out loud, but there were a lot of non-super chats that were just continually thanking you, saying that it was very illuminating and other similar statements, and having a long SFS ruling conversation back
yes, of course.
Multiple Paizo staff members in the chat.
Well, we're all in it together, and not just the community of publishers, but just the community as a whole. This has been a very difficult couple of weeks for everybody, but I think at the end of the day, almost all of us are going to end off in a much stronger position than we were. And part of that's going to be because of the contacts we've made with one another, the common cause that we realize we all have. And at the end of the day, hopefully the ORC license, which will be a tool that people will be able to use forever. To increase innovation, collaboration, and cooperation in the tabletop games industry, which is the industry that I've been in most of my professional life. It's the industry I intend to be in for the rest of my professional life, and it is the most meaningful connection that I have made and the source of almost all my friendships. And I think that I'm not unique in that. I think that is true of very many people involved in this effort, both as publishers and as consumers. And it's great for those who support the ORC license, it's great to have everybody on board. And for those who don't, fair enough. I hope that one day that we end up creating some games with that license that you find attractive and that you play at your table nonetheless. So look forward to a bright future, and thank everybody for their support. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the discount code Open Gaming on Paizo.com for 25% off selected products if you're looking to get into a new game. But even if you're not, check out a lot of these other companies, particularly the list of supporters, those supporting it online. But really any independent RPG publisher could really use your support right now. And I think if you look around, you will find things that you like, and you will find new games and new innovative ideas. And that's the heart of this whole business. So onward and upward, as they say.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking with you again in the near future.
Hope so.
And go get something to eat. And I'm going to probably try to go get some sleep since it's almost midnight here.
I'm going to go answer questions on the ORC licensed Discord server for the next 3 hours and then go to sleep.
There you go. It never ends. So thanks again, Erik. And
really appreciate the invite. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we will see you out there. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.